When two maintenance workers arrived at a sprawling estate in Santa Fe, New Mexico, they were expecting an ordinary workday. What they found instead would shock the nation and send investigators scrambling for answers. The front door was wide open, dogs were wandering loose on the grounds, and inside, hidden from the world for what appeared to be weeks, were the bodies of one of Hollywood's greatest actors, Gene Hackman, and his beloved wife Betsy Arakawa, a two-time Academy Award winner, a man who gave us some of cinema's most unforgettable performances. Gone. And the circumstances surrounding his death? Anything but clear. Today, we're going to walk through everything we know, the timeline, the theories, the unanswered questions, and the remarkable life that Gene Hackman lived before it all came to this tragic end. Stay with us, because this story is far more complicated than the headlines suggest. The discovery it was supposed to be a routine maintenance visit. Two workers arrived at Gene Hackman's property in Santa Fe and immediately noticed something was wrong. The front door to the home stood wide open. Two dogs were roaming freely outside the house, and when they stepped inside, what they encountered was a scene that would prompt them to call authorities immediately. Gene Hackman, 95 years old and one of the most decorated actors in Hollywood history, was found in a small room near the back of the house. A cane and a pair of sunglasses lay nearby, as though he had simply fallen mid-step. His wife, Betsy Arakawa, 63, was discovered in a separate bathroom on the other side of the home. Scattered across the bathroom counter were pills and an open prescription bottle. She was on the floor near the countertop, but perhaps the most haunting detail of all? The condition of their bodies. Both showed significant signs of decomposition, a level of deterioration that suggested they had been dead not for hours, but potentially for days, or even weeks. Inside a famous actor's home in one of America's most vibrant states, two people had apparently died without anyone noticing. A third pet, a dog, was found deceased inside a crate. Two other dogs had survived, which led investigators to believe that some food or water had been accessible for a period, but eventually, even that ran out. The dog in the crate wasn't so lucky. This grim picture raised an immediate and deeply unsettling question: how long had they been there? The investigation begins. At first, local authorities described the scene as one with no obvious signs of foul play. Early reports floated the possibility of carbon monoxide poisoning, a silent, invisible killer that leaves no visible marks and can claim two lives in the same home without either victim ever knowing what happened. But as investigators dug deeper, that theory began to unravel. The New Mexico Gas Company was called in to inspect the property's gas lines. They found nothing. No leaks, no malfunctions, no evidence of carbon monoxide buildup. Subsequent autopsy information also appeared to rule out carbon monoxide as the cause of death. With that explanation off the table, investigators were left with more questions than answers. There were no signs of forced entry anywhere in the home. Neither body showed obvious injuries consistent with a violent confrontation. And yet, the scene didn't add up to a straightforward natural death either. One veteran investigator, someone who had worked thousands of death cases over the course of a long career, put it bluntly: "This is an anomaly. It doesn't make sense to me that two people would simply fall over dead at the same time without some major underlying cause." Federal investigators who arrived at the scene were reportedly stunned by what they encountered. A source close to the investigation described their reaction as one of raw shock, not because death scenes are unusual in their line of work, but because of the specific combination of details: the level of decomposition, the open door, the different rooms, the pills, the fallen cane. None of it told a clean, simple story. Authorities confirmed they were now treating the deaths as suspicious and launched a full investigation. Autopsy results and toxicology reports, the tests that would actually tell them what substances, if any, were in the couple's bodies, were expected to take weeks, possibly months. The theories with so little confirmed, speculation began to fill the void. Let's walk through the main theories investigators and outside experts have explored. Theory 1. Natural causes, sequential deaths. One possibility is that Gene Hackman, at 95 years old, suffered a medical event, perhaps a fall or a cardiac episode, and died. Betsy, upon discovering him, may have gone into shock or experienced her own medical crisis. Perhaps she was overwhelmed by grief, or perhaps she had underlying health conditions of her own. The pills scattered near her could have been medication she was already taking, or they could tell a different story entirely. This theory is plausible, but the significant time gap between their deaths, if there was one, and the state of the bodies makes it difficult to confirm without toxicology results. Theory 2. Environmental factors. The space heater found knocked over near Betsy's body added another layer of complexity. A running heater in an enclosed space raises questions about air quality, temperature, and the rate of decomposition. Experts note that warm, dry air accelerates the drying and mummification of human remains, which would explain the condition of the bodies, but whether the heater contributed directly to their deaths remains unknown. Theory 3. A mutual decision. Some investigators raise the possibility that the couple, facing advancing age and serious health concerns, may have made a private and deliberate decision together. However, this theory has significant weaknesses. In documented cases of this nature, individuals are typically found in close proximity to one another. Gene and Betsy were found in completely different rooms, on opposite sides of a large house. There were also no notes discovered, and the arrangement of the scene didn't clearly point in this direction. Theory 4. Unknown third-party involvement. The open front door nagged at investigators. In the absence of forced entry, it suggested either that the couple had left it open themselves, possibly because one of them was unwell and stepped outside, or that someone else had been in the home at some point. Authorities began reviewing phone records, emails, and any records of medical appointments or visitors in the days leading up to the discovery. So far, nothing publicly confirmed has pointed to another person's involvement, but the possibility hasn't been fully closed. The family speaks. In the days following the discovery, Gene Hackman's children from his first marriage stepped forward to share their grief and their perspective on what might have happened. His daughter Leslie Ann Hackman spoke to the press about her father's physical condition in the months before his death. Despite being 95, she said, he had been in surprisingly good health. He practiced Pilates and yoga several times a week. He hadn't undergone any major surgeries. He was, by her account, aging gracefully and actively. It was the death of Betsy, at just 63, that seemed to raise the most alarm for the family. Even at his age, Dad was in great shape, Leslie said. It's Betsy's death that raises more questions. She was young and she was the one keeping everything together. Leslie spoke warmly about her stepmother's role in her father's life. Betsy took extraordinary care of him. She was always watching over his health, always making sure he was doing well. For that I am deeply grateful, and I am heartbroken that she's gone. Another daughter, Elizabeth, told reporters she initially believed carbon monoxide poisoning might be the explanation, pointing to the fact that both deaths appeared sudden and showed no obvious signs of trauma. The three siblings, Elizabeth, Leslie, and Gene's granddaughter, Annie, released a joint statement expressing their devastation. They described him not as the Hollywood icon the world knew, but simply as Dad and Grandpa. They wrote that his loss had left an emptiness that words simply could not fill. Remembering Gene Hackman to understand why the world reacted with such sadness and disbelief, you have to understand just how towering Gene Hackman's legacy truly was. He didn't have an easy road to success. He started at the Pasadena Playhouse in California, the same school where a young Dustin Hoffman was also studying. By some accounts, Hackman's own classmates voted him among the least likely to succeed. He was rejected from audition after audition. Directors didn't think his look or his style fit what Hollywood wanted. But Gene Hackman was not the type of man who accepted other people's ceilings. He kept working. He took small theater roles. He appeared in minor television parts. He ground it out year after year until the work started to speak for itself. His first major breakthrough came with Bonnie and Clyde in 1967, where he played Buck Barrow, Clyde's loyal, doomed brother. The performance was raw, human, and deeply moving. It earned him his first Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor and announced to Hollywood that Gene Hackman was a force to be reckoned with. Then came 1971 and The French Connection. Director William Friedkin cast Hackman as Popeye Doyle, a relentless, morally complicated New York detective chasing a massive drug shipment. It was a physically demanding, psychologically complex role, and Hackman delivered one of the most electrifying performances in cinema history. He won the Academy Award for Best Actor. The film won Best Picture. And Gene Hackman was no longer a rising star. He was a Hollywood legend. What followed was a career of almost unmatched range. In The Conversation in 1974, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, he played Harry Call, a surveillance expert consumed by guilt, paranoia, and loneliness. The film was nominated for Best Picture. Critics called Hackman's performance a masterclass in restraint. He showed his dramatic depth again in Scarecrow, playing opposite Al Pacino in a quiet, tender story about friendship between two drifters. Then, just a few years later, he pivoted completely and played Lex Luthor in Superman, bringing humor, menace, and enormous charisma to one of comics' most iconic villains. In 1992, he reunited with Clint Eastwood for Unforgiven, playing the terrifying Sheriff Little Bill Daggett, a man who believed in order but practiced cruelty. The performance won him his second Academy Award, this time for Best Supporting Actor. And then there was The Royal Tenenbaums in 2001, where Wes Anderson coaxed one of his most surprisingly tender performances. a charming, selfish, ultimately heartbreaking patriarch trying to reconnect with the family he had failed. Actress Gwyneth Paltrow, who starred alongside him in that film, posted a tribute on social media after news broke of his death, a simple photograph of the two of them together, and a broken heart. Clint Eastwood, who had directed and acted alongside Hackman in Unforgiven, released a statement that captured what so many in Hollywood were feeling. He said that no actor was more talented, that every performance Hackman gave was real and powerful, and that beyond being a colleague, Gene Hackman had been a close and trusted friend. Morgan Freeman also paid tribute, as did dozens of others across the industry. The later years and health battles. Gene Hackman's retirement from acting in 2004 wasn't simply a choice. It was, in part, a medical necessity. In an interview that year, he revealed that his doctors had told him his heart was not in the condition to handle the pressures of working on major film productions. This wasn't his first health scare. Back in 1990, at the age of 60, while filming multiple projects simultaneously, he had undergone an angioplasty, a procedure to clear a blocked artery near his heart. His doctor at the time said they had treated him just in time, and that the intervention had likely prevented a full cardiac event. In a later interview with Larry King, Hackman reflected on the episode with characteristic calm. "I didn't fully understand how serious it was at the time," he said. "I try not to have many fears. My main concern has always been making sure my wife and family are provided for." In 2012, at the age of 81, he was struck by a pickup truck while riding his bicycle near his Florida home. He wasn't wearing a helmet. He was airlifted to a trauma center in Miami, not because his injuries were severe, but because the accident occurred on an island with limited medical access. He was released after a few days with minor injuries. In retirement, Hackman found a different kind of fulfillment. He painted, he fished, he co-wrote historical fiction novels with archaeologist Daniel Lanahan, and penned Western and crime fiction on his own. He described writing as a gentler pressure than filmmaking, something he could control, something that was his alone. His last confirmed public appearance came in 2023, when he and Betsy were photographed outside a restaurant in New Mexico. He looked frail, leaning on a cane, holding his wife's arm. But he was there, living quietly, in the state they had called home for so many years. As of now, the investigation into the deaths of Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa remains open. Authorities are waiting on the results of detailed toxicology reports, which will reveal what, if anything, was in their systems at the time of death. Phone records and medical histories are being reviewed. Every detail is being examined. Investigators have not ruled anything out. Natural causes, a tragic accident, an environmental hazard, all of these remain on the table. So does the possibility, however remote it may seem, that something more troubling occurred. What is certain is this: 2 lives have ended, and the world is less for it. Gene Hackman spent decades proving that the people who doubted him were wrong. He built one of the most respected bodies of work in the history of American cinema. He lived to 95, apparently still doing yoga. And he died as he had lived most of his later years, quietly, in New Mexico, with the woman he loved nearby. The questions may take months to fully answer, but the legacy? That one is already written. Thank you for watching. If you found this story moving or thought-provoking, please leave your thoughts in the comments below. We genuinely love to hear how you remember Gene Hackman and what his films have meant to you. Make sure you like this video and subscribe so you don't miss future coverage as this investigation develops. We'll be following every update and bringing it to you as soon as it breaks.